Hello and well met. This is Laren with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to go over some tips that often are overlooked or perhaps forgotten when we start our journey on the Fantasy Grounds Unity platform, or we've returned after many months, or whatever the situation may be. You might be migrating over from one of the other virtual tabletops. So it really depends on what your needs are and what exactly you're trying to do with the platform. So first things first is I wanted to mention a couple things about the platform so that you'll be more informed with how that might impact your sessions, or what you might need to do prior to running Fantasy Grounds. So we'll talk about that first. So without further ado, let's bring up the Fantasy Grounds website. So this is something you should probably get familiar with. This is where you're going to start your journey if you're going to use Fantasy Grounds or you have used it for a while. It is required to have an account. So even if you're a player and you don't want to buy anything, if you use the demo version, you will be faced with potentially having to download the demo and creating an account and connecting to your host or to the GM. So that's something that some platforms don't really you don't have to do that. I think most of them require it, but that is something that you want to keep in mind when you first start Fantasy Grounds. And if you actually go to the first screen and you scroll down to the bottom, there is a brief trailer. It's a little bit dated, but this is from the right after the Kickstarter, I believe. And then you also have these two little buttons down here at the bottom, which are really handy. So if you're going to be a game master, they have a shortcut that you can click on, and essentially tells you to create a forum account. You get the program, install it, and then you start finding players for your games. So there are a lot of things in between those, but that is essentially your journey when you're going to start Fantasy Grounds. And I think that's a nice handy little guide there that gets missed because you have to actually scroll down to see it. So that's a really helpful actual guide if you go through these steps. So if I click on this, this is going to tell me that I already have an account because I'm already connected. But if you hadn't the account, it would actually prompt you to join and that sort of thing. So it would be helpful if you're new to Fantasy Grounds. And then it tells you to get the program, which essentially is getting the product page. And what you'll notice here is it gives you a rundown of the capabilities. So a lot of people ask what you get with the demo or the standard version or the ultimate. So some of this may not make sense to you until you actually start playing, but generally speaking, you need an account if you're going to build your own characters. So if you don't want to rely on a third-party GM or something and you just want to build your own stuff, at least get the standard and then get a rule book or two to build characters. That's probably all you'd need for a player. If you're just checking out Fantasy Grounds or you don't have any intention investing in it, you can get by with a demo, but you are relying on another person to have access to the account. So there's no portal or anything that you can log into to look at your character unless the player is connected to the host that's providing the content. So if you have a demo account, you're kind of at the mercy of the game master. If you have a standard account, you're just a player, you can at least make your own sessions and you can create characters to your heart's content if you have the content loaded. So if you purchase, like, for example, the Pathfinder 2 core rulebook, those sort of things, or maybe the player's handbook for D&D, and then you could build characters and then transfer those over to your GM, or you can export them out of Fantasy Grounds and then have them mailed and uploaded to whoever you want when you play games. So you will have to have an account, some sort of subscription or the full license for the standard, which is I think around $40, and it's like $5 a month if you don't want to pay the fee outright. And then of course you have to buy things from your data library. So down here it shows you that some of the rule sets here have some basic rules, but if you really want to have the functionality and the shortcuts and all that kind of stuff, it's good to have at least the real basic content. So that'd be rule books and such. So you do get some tokens, some battle maps, some portraits. There is an asset pack, or 2 or 3 of those actually. And then there are some really basic core rule sets that come up when you first load up the interface. But again, they're very pared down. You won't have a lot of content, and it's very limited. So you're kind of lacking artwork and options and sort of thing. But you could technically build on this and save it and use it for your own uses. So you don't have to use all the functionality in Fantasy Grounds. You can just kind of use it as a library and a way to enter data. That, I mean, if you want to do it like that, that's a standard account would cover that. So here's your pricing here. So obviously the demo's free, which is basically you don't have to do anything, but you can leave the license key part blank. But you still have to have a Fantasy Grounds account, so you just don't need a license key. Or you can do this first time thing where it's $4 a month or $40. And then if you're going to go for the gusto and invest in the program and use it a lot, you can get the ultimate license, which comes with everything that is listed here. You can host anybody, but it also, you can demo it for anyone, which is important because if you only have the standard license, you can't really host anything. But if you if you're connected to another GM, you can certainly use it in that regard. Over here, it's like $10 a month or $150 for one-time fee, which is kind of steep initially, but once you pay for that, you're not getting nickel and dimed as much. But regardless of which one you go with, you're going to have to still buy books. A lot of people complain that they already have the D&D Beyond account, or they already have the hardback books or the PDFs, and they don't want to reinvest in that. So if that's the case, you could technically enter the data. So if you have a standard account and you wanted to enter the player's handbook, you really could. The functionality is there. You just have to know how to input the data yourself. And that takes a little while, and you got to get a little bit more familiar with the interface and how things work. But you technically can do that. So it is possible. It's just very time consuming, and it does take a while to kind of get used to how to do it. If you just buy like the basic rule book, that's what I suggest. And then everything else you can kind of enter yourself as you get familiar with the platform. So it's kind of up to you what your needs are, how much time you have, all those sort of things. So that's just something I wish I would have known before I invested in Fantasy Grounds. There's some things that aren't really as clear until you actually start using it. If you buy things from the store, quite often they're on sale. So if you go to the store option and you go to shop, you'll come to the store page, and what you'll notice a lot of times is that there'll be sales going on for a lot of the products. So this is something that you'll come up when you're actually using the program, is that you'll notice that there will be a lot of sales announced throughout the year. So there, it just depends on what you're doing and what kind of stuff. But see, here's a sale on the Cyberpunk Black Chrome, and there's a couple others on here. But every week, if you join the newsletter, it's going to give you an update on what's on sale, new stuff that's coming out, and also events. So there is communication about changes and things that are coming up in the actual program. And if you actually use the forums, which is part of their main website, this is where the community interacts with one another. And it's also a place where you can report problems. You can look at the laboratory, and this actually shows the latest round of updates that they're trying to test and put out. So this is something that would essentially they're working on and they're working towards. So if you want to know what the latest features are or what they're working on, they don't really put out a roadmap or anything. They just kind of post it, the initial parts in here. So if you want to see what they're working on or that sort of thing, you can look at the laboratory. So that's kind of your roadmap, at least for the immediate future. And then every now and then they'll do a show where they announce something they're working on or something like that. And they don't do that very often because they don't want to promise something, overpromise, and then never deliver. So that's part of their policy. But nonetheless, if you want to find a game, you can go to this looking for game section, and then there's a game system area where you can actually go into the threads, read, report, discuss, those sort of things with the different supported rule sets. And if you play one of the other rule sets that's not as big or as popular, they do have an other game systems area where you can go through here. Now, this doesn't mean the games aren't any good. It just means there's not a lot of activity on them. So you got the main ones covered here, and then they have all the extra ones down here into others. And there's a create and share area, which is kind of a place where you can upload stuff that you're working on and share it with the community for like testing and such. So that's basically the website. That's a really valuable resource. The more you use it and actually read through it and start looking at stuff, the more you'll learn, and also you'll understand where your resources are. So that it's important to kind of know that. So the House of Healing is where people go when they, when they have problems, or they need to report something that looks funny, or they're unsure of certain things. So that could be a resource for you. In the store area, when you go shopping, you'll notice that some of these platforms may or may not have line of sight. So if you see this LOS, that means that any maps or anything, they've already put in the line of sight for the maps. So that could be something that you would want to check before you buy, in case you don't quite understand what's going on with it. Like this, for instance, this monstrous pack 6 for the Shadow of the Demon Lord. This has no line of sight in there because it's just a creature pack. There's really no map, so they wouldn't include line of sight in that. But if you want to pick something up, I can just put these in my basket, and it'll show up on the bottom here as to what I've placed in the basket to buy. So I have 2 items that I might pick up this week for the Shadow of the Demon Lord. And when I click on the checkout button, you'll notice something. So I get in most cases, I get a discount for the content that I have. So if you go over to a bundle, let's say, so let me go to the bundle pricing. So if I go to the bundle pricing, you'll get a little bit of a discount with this. So I own most of the content, but I don't own everything. So that's probably why that discount isn't applied. But if I get the bundle pricing, I can click on this and go to the bundle, and then it will actually probably put that in my cart for me. That is going, yeah. So if I go to checkout, once I get the bundle price, it will make the discounts. It'll make it better and actually give me a chance to get caught up on the actual content if you're someone who likes to collect more than one book or whatever. So there's that. You do have a pricing break if you go and buy everything in the rule set and they come out with something new. You'll get a discount on that. So that's kind of cool for that. And you do have, like, this is on sale, this Spelljack. This is something that you might see or want to invest in. So you don't have to buy everything at once. I would just recommend keeping an eye on the sales page, and then when your product comes up that you like, it'll more than likely go on sale. Like some of this stuff here, like the Shadow of the Demon Lord, or even the Cyberpunk, this just came out like a month or 2 ago, and it's already on sale. So this generally don't have to wait too long. Like this Rootmark, this is very recent, like within the last couple months. So it's already on sale. It's already almost $10 off. So you don't have to go out and buy everything at once and then, shell out a bunch of money. You can actually piece together a pretty nice library in a year without having to break the bank. Or you can wait for one of their sales. They usually have a big sale. There'll probably be one coming up here in the next couple months or less. And then they'll have one in the winter time. So there's usually like a summer sale, and then there's like a big winter sale. So I can't guarantee you. I don't know what days or what exact times those will happen, but it's quite often. And they just had a sale not very long ago in which they were honoring a sale through Steam. So whenever Steam has stuff on sale, they try to match that as part of their agreement with the Steam store so they can sell product there. So if there's a special sale on Steam that's related to Fantasy Grounds, it might convert over to a sale for the Fantasy Grounds store as well. So that's just some things that you're gonna notice when you first start using it, or if you forgot. So if you want to know, like if something has a line of sight already built on it for the walls and occluders, you just look for that little LOS button, and that usually indicates that. So let's go back to the Fantasy Grounds platform. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that back out. So when you first start using Fantasy Grounds, a lot of the times you'll be a little bit overwhelmed with a lot of the options. So depending on what rule set you're interested in, you can actually load this up. If you have your own account or you want to check something out before you buy anything, some of the rule sets come with some basic stuff. So I'm going to use the D&D rule set because I know it has an SRD and kind of a basic thing included. So I'm going to do this basic, I'll say it's D&D basic. So I'm creating a campaign. And why I do this is so if I put D&D in front of it, in case I have other rule sets, when I go to the back end of Fantasy Grounds where these are stored, I can find them easier. So if I go to my campaigns folder, you see all these D&D ones that these will tell me these are not Pathfinder or some other rule set. So that's why I do it that way. So if I have to go to the back end, which is you can reach that from this up in this upper left corner up here, you can actually reach that. So let me switch over to the okay, so here's Fantasy Grounds. Let's go to this, which is going to give you a little bit more of a view. And also you'll have the pointer, so that way you can see what I'm pointing at. And then I got to resize it a little bit. So if I go to the display capture and kind of resize this a little, kind of bring it in, make it look pretty. There we go. Okay, so this is just the preliminary stuff that you're going to want to look at when you first start using Fantasy Grounds. And there are a lot of things that will kind of evade you until you kind of get used to using the program. So it really depends on what your needs are and what you're trying to achieve. But nonetheless, let's go into this. And here's the pointer. And like I was saying earlier, you can go to the back end of Fantasy Grounds on this top left corner. And this is where your campaigns are stored. Extensions, if you have any third-party ones that are not part of the Forge, your images, modules, portraits, tokens, that sort of thing. So that's where a lot of that's stored. So if you're going to add third-party tokens that are not part of Fantasy Grounds or they're not purchased from the store, you would basically get this token packs and you could put them in here to essentially make it easier for you to access. And now that I have a rule set selected, I'm going to choose to put it on the local area network. If you put it on the cloud and have it public, it will show up in the actual join campaign section. If your players want to join your table, they'll be able to see your session, and if you give them the password and such, if you put a password on it, that I suggest you do, and that way they can't connect to your game. But I'm going to actually connect to my local area network, so I'm not actually going online. I'm just kind of showing it on my own personal computer. And then you have all these extensions. So some of these come with Fantasy Grounds, like you have this wood theme. There's a simple gray, simple brown. Those are stuff that comes with the platform, and they're free. But there's other ones like this Wizard Desk. There's the one that comes with the Shadow of the Demon Lord. Those sort of things either come with the rule set or they come with the art subscription pack. So if you want more assets and more things like that, if you get the asset pack, you'll have access to those. Or if you do a subscription for a year, whatever, it's like $50, and you get everything. You get you get the themes, you get the modules, and all the extra artwork that comes outside of Fantasy Grounds. So this would be like in the format of a theme. But those are just kind of the things that you might want to look at as you get used to the platform. But for the time being, if I don't select any theme at all, it's going to just give me the generic background, which is that leather kind of look, the classic look. So I'm going to go ahead and start this, and as it's loading, I just want to let you know that we are just a volunteer community. We are not directly affiliated with Fantasy Grounds or Smiteworks. They tolerate us. They have a pretty good working relationship with us. We've kind of tried to work with them and not against them, and we try our best to to kind of be good about stuff and not act too crazy. And really, we're just here to kind of help the average user, because a lot of the manuals aspect of learning the platform is actually getting to see how it's used, or in layman's terms, and not all these acronyms and slang and that sort of thing. So it's kind of depends on what your needs are, but essentially this is what we do here as a kind of a volunteer service. So this is the basic the platform interface that you'll be faced with when you first start Fantasy Grounds. I'm going to pretend like I don't own anything. So you have a direct link here to the user guides and the forums. And this little show on load button down here is something that will trigger this to pop up every time you join the session. So if I exit back out of this and go back in, this is going to pop up over and over and over unless you click on that, and then that will dismiss it. The next time you come in, it won't pop up again. But this is a user guide and the forums, direct links to that. Go to the next button, you have data modules. So here, this would be you would load any of your purchase content or third party. If you have the core rules, it'll load that. You can load all the rules, so if you own most of the rules, you can load it from there. There's the basic rules and the SRD, which are free, that comes with the 5th edition rule set. So I'm going to click on both of those to just load that, because that's the free stuff that you get with the platform. So everything else would be purchased, or stuff that you've made, or stuff that you purchase on the DM's Guild, stuff like that. So once I've done with that, I'm going to go ahead and hit next. This takes you to the options, so I'm not going to worry about that right now. So just go ahead and hit finish. And once you hit finish, that's pretty much your loading. And if you go to the library on the top right and you click on modules, this is what I just loaded. So that's how you load your modules or your basic content. So this is the SRD, and then you have the players and the DMs kind of basic guide, which is a very, very narrow slice of the official player's handbook, monster manual, and the Dungeon Master's guide. And these SRD versions are very similar. Some of the information is repeated, but here you get magic items, you get more of a bestiary, and then you get the SRD data, which is kind of a combination of these two, but very pared down and very without artwork and such. So with these, you're not going to get a whole bunch of fancy artwork and maps. You're just going to get the real basic data. If you plan on building your own content, you can use the SRD and just kind of build on top of that. But that assumes that you're familiar with the platform and the rule set. So that's be more of an intermediate thing. But you can enter your own data and create your own stuff. So there is that option. So with all this stuff here, you really probably don't need to load all this. I'm just showing you some of the stuff you're getting when you just get the platform itself without any content. So I'm going to hit this activation button down here, and it does come with some generic stuff that comes with Fantasy Grounds. So there's a battle map pack that is put out by Fantasy Grounds. It's a little bit old, but it's part of the core set. So you get some battle maps, so you can kind of check that out. There is a calendar system that comes with internally in Fantasy Grounds that's free, so you can load the calendars. That's something you can use within the interface. And then there's a couple other things. There's like a fumble table and some other minor things that you can load when it comes to your first time using the platform. So I'll just load that content for now. And one of the things I believe that once you've loaded your content, you kind of understand how to manage this. What you'll want to know is that, like for instance, the player's handbook part or the basic rules, if you click on reference manual, this is the actual book, or the PDF in this case. And if you click on these chapters, this is just like owning the PDF. So you can go through there, you can scroll, you can use the arrow keys to navigate through pages. And on top of that, these are linked, so you can just click on them, go straight to them. And you have a search field on the bottom left. And you can also bookmark this stuff. So if you wanted to take a look at spells, and in this case, it's only listing a few cleric and a few wizard spells. But if you click on this, and let's say you wanted to look up guidance later, you can actually left click and drag and put that down in the hotkeys. So that way you can save that for later, so you don't have to dig through this whole thing to find it again. So that's one of the nice features of Fantasy Grounds, is that you're able to drag and drop the links into this hotbar, and there's different areas. Like if you hit Shift and Alt, there's different rows that you can utilize. So there's a lot of functionality here that's kind of hidden, but it is something you'll get used to. There's a lot of right-click dialogue. So if you right-click on something, you're going to get more options. So if you learned that Fantasy Grounds is kind of a right-click happy platform, like if you right-click, you can revert changes in this case, but if you right-click on the chat area, you can clear the chat, and if you right-click on the dice, there's different options for dice. So right-clicking on different things in Fantasy Grounds brings up additional menu options or additional functionality. So that's important to learn that. The other thing that I wanted to mention in the beginning here is that Fantasy Grounds always opens new windows in the center of the interface. So if I click on the campaign data, and let's say I want to look at images, it's always going to open in the center. So if you don't want this to come up in the center when you start this up again, or when you're going to look for stuff, you can always move it, and you can actually take and drag it and center it and make it whatever size you want. When you close this and you come back to it in this session, it's going to come back where you actually put it. So that was the images. So now it's going to pop up where I want it to show up instead of in the center. Because what happens quite often is you'll open up this NPC thing by accident and go, oh crap, I didn't want that. And then you'll open up the tables and oh crap, now it's in the way. So you want to move that and then size the window where you want it and where you want it to come up the next time. And then when you close that and open it back up, it's going to show up where you actually left it last. So once you understand that, it makes the managing of the tables, or in this case, anything that you're using, like this reference tool, for example, if I open that up again, it should open up over here on the right where I opened it up and moved it and resized it to. So if I go back into modules, and I'm going to go back to the player's rules and then the reference manual, if I click on that, it's going to go where I left it. So once you understand that about Fantasy Grounds, it makes it a lot easier to manage the windows. Because once you have an understanding of where you want to put things, it's a lot easier to deal with. So that's an important thing to know about Fantasy Grounds. And I'm going to actually build a really quick character using just the SRD. My options are going to be super limited. It's going to kind of suck, but it's going to give you an idea of the limitations or the things that you might want to check out before you buy a bunch of books and such. So I'm going to close the modules, and as a player or a GM, you can come over to the player section on the right, go to characters, and again, this will pop up in the middle. This is the only exception. I don't know why it does this, but if I move this out of the way and I close it and I click on characters again, it's always going to anchor to the middle. I don't know why it does that, but this is the only window that is the exception to the rule. You can move that wherever you want, and no matter what you do, it's going to come up in the center. So there might be a reason for that, but all the other windows behave differently. This is the only one that does not allow you to focus it somewhere else. And that could be because when you sign on to the table, it'll pop up in the center so that you can claim your character. And if it's buried or set off to the side, you might miss it or something, especially if you're new. But I'm going to use the character wizard, which is a quicker way to build characters. And it's something that you have to get used to, and it's something that I recommend that you master before you really start tackling a bunch of other things. So character creation, I believe, in my honest opinion, is probably the most difficult and the most specific thing to each rule set in Fantasy Grounds. So most of the functionality of Fantasy Grounds is the same throughout most or all of the rule sets, except for character creation, some combat things, and then there's a couple of like vehicles and stuff. But other than that, everything else is kind of the same. If you open this up for Pathfinder, it's going to look a lot like the same thing. It might be called something else, but the data is sorted kind of similarly. So once you kind of get a mastery of one rule set, going to another rule set won't be so bad. you'll kind of have an idea of where things are. You may not understand how the rules work or the character sheet, but you'll at least know where to find it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the character wizard. And one of the things that happens or goes wrong with this case is that sometimes people will open this up, but they will not load the library. So if you have a player that's complaining that they don't see any data, it's quite often they haven't loaded any of this content that you've shared. So they have to go into the activation window and actually click load. So if you've shared the character creation books with your players, one of the steps that they have to do is go into the modules and activate them. They don't even have to activate all of them, just the ones they want to use. And that way, they're not getting overwhelmed and they can load, pick and choose what they want to load. But generally, they will want at least the core rulebook. That's kind of a no-brainer there, but it happens where people come on here and they just start clicking buttons and they don't realize what the steps are. So this is something you got to kind of help them with, and you should learn this process as a game master. But I would do this before I start running into games, is really get to know how to build characters, because you're going to have to help your players. So that's really why that's important. You don't necessarily need to know exactly everything about the character, but you need to know where the things are, how to do it, how to fix things, that sort of thing. So I'm going to make a dwarf. This is from the basic rules from the player's handbook, pared down version. So this is the basic rules, or you can use a halfling or a human. So these are the basic races. So I might actually do an elf, which is something that is part of the basic rules. And then there's the SRD version. The SRD version is a very flat version. The elf version in the player's basic rules has a few sub races, so that's why I'm going to use that. So I'm going to go ahead and pick an elf or a dwarf. I think I want to do the dwarf. They're more interesting to me. So I'll click this option here, with this little plus button here, will drop down and give you the sub races, so you can add it from here. So there's a hill dwarf. So I'll go ahead and add the hill dwarf. And as you can see up here, it's not quite satisfied because you have to pick a tool proficiency for a dwarf. So that's one of your features. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the Smith's tools. So I'm familiar with using them. I've got proficiency with it. And once I've done that, it satisfies this option here. So now if I go to class, there aren't very many supported classes or subtypes or archetypes. But I'm going to go ahead and pick Cleric because I know that's one of them that's supported in the basic rules fully. So I'm going to click on that. And what I'm going to do is pick my proficiencies. So it's asking me for the 2 skills. So these are related to the actual class. So I'm going to pick medicine and I'm going to pick history. So those are the 2 that satisfies the requirement, part of the requirements. And then I'm going to pick my divine domain, which is part of the cleric. So you get 2, I believe. No, you only get this one. So this is a life domain. So this is what I'm saying with the basic rules. You don't have all the other domain options. So that's why you would buy the extra books and all that other stuff if you want more, if you want more content. So these are just kind of explaining some of the things you get with your class. So these are all things that are part of being a life cleric and all this spell casting explanation. If you're going to multi-class, this would be where you do that. And then you'll notice here there's a spells tab. So if you click on that, this is where you would actually pick your spells. This particular version of the character wizard does not prevent you from using more spells or additional spells than what you already have. So what you're going to want to do here is just tell your players, okay, you get 3 cantrips, so they can go through this list. So if I was a player, I'm going to pick guidance, probably some kind of like spare the dying, and then I might do light or sacred flame. Yeah, I'll do light. So it's pretty important in most cases. So once you've satisfied that, it's not going to stop you from picking more, but it is listing how many that you get. So there is a point where you may not trust your players, and they're all going to pick more than what they should. But there's really not much that Fantasy Grounds will do with that. That's up to you to manage in your players. So if you're going over that for some reason, that's basically on you and the table, not so much Fantasy Grounds. It's not going to limit or put any penalty on people for doing that. And then for first level spells, I can click on that, and I do get a few of those that I can prepare. So with the domain spells, you're going to get a few extra bonus spells with this actual life domain. So I know that Bless and I believe Cure Wounds is part of that. So if you go back to, if you're done, once you're done, you can actually go through, or you can look in the library over here, and it'll tell you the domain spells that you get for free. They don't count against your memorization. And then you can pick, I'll pick a few more. So Guiding Bolt, probably Healing Word, and maybe a couple others. So priests kind of get their own, they're a little bit different, but they get a lot of cool stuff. So they don't have as many memorization or prepared penalties as wizards would, because they basically can have access to any spell, but not necessarily cast them all. So let's go with the Tech Good and Evil. Okay, so there we go. There's our spells. And now we'll go to abilities. So this is where some confusion comes in when you're building characters. So remember, each rule set will have a little bit different experience depending on how the character wizard's set up. But in this case, you can pick the methodology. So you can do the standard array, which just gives you all the scores, and you can just shuffle these around. So for this, I might swap my wisdom with strength, and then now I have a 10 strength, and then maybe take this 14, move that to strength or con. But I get a +2 on Constitution and +1 on Wisdom, so that's pretty decent. So there's my final set. But if I wanted to roll, or if I wanted to do a point buy system, I can do that too. If you want a miscellaneous adjustment, let's say your GM says, go ahead and give yourself 1 point to assign wherever you want. So I'm going to put that in strength. So I'm just going to add 1 here, and that will add to this. So this is for miscellaneous. This ASI is for when you level up, or at first level, if you picked a variation, like a human or half-elf variant, you would get this ability score increase option, or some sort of increase at 4th level or something like that. And then this racial bonus shows what came over from your race. And then here's the base numbers that you can left click and click on and hold and drag those over wherever you want those to go. And then the override is just a number that's going to override everything regardless of what's here. So if you need to, for some reason, override anything in there, you can just type in the value. So this is like basically picking your own scores without rolling or using any system. So that's your ability scores. Like I said, you can roll. So if you do the dice roll, you have an option here where here you can just type in and not worry about it, or you can roll. So if I roll the dice, it's going to roll all the die at once, and then it will assign wherever these go. So intelligence, charisma, strength, it kind of populated that here. If your GM lets you, you can roll again, and it will replace those values. So that's a lot better roll. So I might go with that. And then it does the 4d6 drop the lowest method. So that's what this does. So if this is the case, I can ask if I can reassign these to different places. So I think I will drag this over to Wisdom, and then I have a 14 there, 14 there. So this isn't too bad. So this might be the, where you're going to start with your character. Or if you want to do point buy, you can drop down to the point buy system and then start assigning numbers based on your pool of remaining points. Again, it's not going to stop you from going over 27. So I might go up to maybe 10 here. My dex is going to be 10. I don't care so much about my charisma, but I will put 1 point in there. Con, I can go up a few without breaking the bank because I already get a +2 here. So I think I'll go up to maybe 12, and that'll give me a 14 overall. Intelligence, I'll just kind of go up to 9 for now. Wisdom, I definitely want that to be at least 16. So that would be so I got 18 points remaining. So I'm going to put 1 in strength. I'm going to put 1 in dexterity, and I'll put 1 in my charisma. So I still have, 6 points to play with. So let me go to intelligence for 1 there, and maybe con, I'll put 1, and that leaves me with 4. So probably dex, I'll go with 1. And then strength, I'll go with 1. And then maybe, let me see, I can't go any higher in wisdom, so maybe my charisma. So you can see near now I'm actually was able to use the point buy, and it keeps track of how many you have. But there's nothing that would keep me from adding something later. So it doesn't prevent that, but it gives you 3 or 4 methods to create the ability score. So it just depends on your table, what your needs are. But if you need to just override, you can come down here at the bottom. So now that that's satisfied, then I can go to the background, pick a background that's appropriate from where your character's from or their profession or whatever they were doing before they adventured. So in this case, this guy was not an acolyte, but he might have been a soldier at one time. So he had volunteered early in his career to help his people. And now I get to pick a proficiency. So I will click this and I get an additional proficiency bonus in another type of thing. So I'm going to go with, I think I'll go with a dragon chest or vehicles. Yeah, I'm going to go with vehicles because he rode kind of like a chariot type thing. So that allows him to pilot a wagon or a chariot. So maybe he carried supplies on some sort of conveyance. And then it shows the military rank, and then the skills, you get athletics and intimidation. And once this background is set up, the screen check will appear. And you'll see that you can have the flexibility of changing these. So if for some reason you want to change the skills, you can, but these are the 2 that come with that background. So this way it doesn't lock you out of it. And for equipment, you have 2 different things you can do. You can go with the starting kit, or you can go with some wealth here and just buy your own equipment. The starting kit's a lot easier, so I'm just going to do that for brevity. And then once you do that, you're going to get a dagger, a shield, some common clothes, and a pouch. Now for your background kit, you can pick any of these things that you want to get. So I think I picked the navigation for basically for using the piloting basically for a vehicle. So I'm just going to grab a dice set for background kit. For the actual weapon of choice, I'm going to go with Warhammer. And then for the actual armor itself, I'm going to go with chainmail. And then my other weapon or item, I'm going to go with a light crossbow. And then for my gear or my pack, I'm going to use the explorer's pack instead of the priest. And then I get a choice of a holy symbol, so I'm going to use reliquary as my symbol. So now it kind of lists up here what you have. So if you have additional gold that you'd like to spend, or your GM's going to give you a few other things, what I might do is come down and add an item, which is this option below. And I'm going to go with weapons, I think. No, gear. And I'm going to go with bolts because I want some crossbow bolts. I don't think you get that with that. So I'm going to grab some crossbow bolts and then a case which will hold the crossbow bolts. So there's a case for the crossbow bolts. And let's just say the GM is going to be generous and give us a 1 healing potion. So I'm going to type healing down here and grab a healing potion. So you can add things if you need to. You don't necessarily have to buy them or anything. It's kind of up to your group and how you do things. But that should be good enough for starting gear. I can't think of anything else I would need. So maybe I might need torches or something, but we'll find out. So once I'm done here, everything here is satisfied. I can go to the commit screen. And what this will do is kind of give me a breakdown, an overview of what I picked. And then if I need to, I would go back and make changes. But if you're done and you don't think any changes are needed or required, then you can type in your name up here. I'm just going to do Dwarven Life Cleric. That way, if I ever have to use it again, I got a base for it. Dwarf Life Cleric. And then that way, if I ever want to use this again, I can find it. If I just put a name there, I might not associate that with anything in particular. So I use that if I don't have a formal name, and I don't want to give it a formal name if I'm not familiar with it, because later on, if I want to search for that, at least I'll have this Dwarven Life Cleric. I'll know what it started as. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Once I do that, then the actual character sheet is written, and it comes from all the choices that I made, and you can kind of look it over. But on the right-hand side are all the different tabs for your options. So if you click on the next tab on the right, here's all your skills that comes with your build. So there's my 4 skills that I had. And then I actually have like that driving skill, which is the vehicle. So I'm going to go ahead and put vehicles land, because that's one of the proficiencies that I chose. And then I can base that off wisdom or whatever I want. In this case, I'll go with wisdom. And I'm proficient with, that's what the star is. So I added that manually. You don't have to do this, but it makes it more convenient. If you're going to pilot something and you want to make a roll to control it or something, this might be handy for that. Or if you have smith tools, which I do. So I'm going to add another tool here. So I'm going to type tool and then smith. And then go ahead and put whatever you think. I think con or wisdom works good with that. So now I have these added as additional proficiencies. Probably very rarely use them, but if I wanted to fix or craft armor or do some downtime activities, I got the roll all set up and it's already adding in my proficiency bonus. So instead of making a wisdom check and then adding it manually, I just can do it from here. So that's just a suggestion. You don't have to do that. And then here's all the abilities that you get with this particular build. So here's your bonus proficiencies. So in this case, it says when you choose this domain at first level, you gain proficiency with heavy armor. So this is not a normal thing that a priest would get, except for in this case, it's a dwarven priest, and it is one of the life abilities that you get, the features for being a life cleric. So in this area here, I'm going to have to add that to my list here. So I can type in heavy armor, and then if I ever need to use it or put some on, or if I buy some later, I'm proficient with it. So I added that manually. This next thing, Disciple of Life, defines what that means. This is a feature. This is going to add a bonus to your spell casting in regards to healing. So I want to take a look at that later, so I'm going to pull that out later. The Divine Domain just kind of gives you a breakdown of this life cleric or any type of domain that you use. So it says that you'll get different things, like the life domain is detailed at the end of the class description. It provides a list of gods associated with, that sort of thing. And then for military rank, this just basically gives you your ranking in regards to your background. So you might have a rank from your career. So this might be something for role play, things you want to detail later. And then you have your spellcasting definition, which basically tells you how your spellcasting works, how you do your spell save DC. It talks about your spellcasting focus. In this case, it would be like a holy symbol. It kind of it defines your spellcasting ability within the rule set. And then you have your dwarven stuff. So you have this dwarven resilience. So that gives you a saving throw versus poison with advantage. And then you also have a resistance against poison. So I'll bring that out. This toughness, this is already baked into the rule set, but for every level for this particular dwarf build, you're going to get an increase by 1 for hit points. So there's not much you can do with that, but if you have this trait, you'll automatically get that +1 as you level up. So it's kind of a feature that's built into Fantasy Grounds. It's baked in. You don't have to accommodate for that. I kind of wish they would notate that. Like, it would be nice if they said, like, afterwards in parentheses, maybe they would say something like, this is already factored in or something. Because if you're new to Fantasy Grounds, you probably wouldn't know that. Let's see. So speed, that comes with your race. So in this case, it's 25 feet. That's already recorded on the character sheet. In the front here, it lists your speed already, so we don't have to mess with that. Let's see. Stone cunning is a check that you can make versus a, something to do with building, or smith work, something to do with rocks, basically masonry. So if that is your thing, if that's something you get for being a dwarf, there's two different ways you can handle this. You can make this as an effect on your actions tab, or you can create a separate thing in your skills, which I kind of like doing. So I'm going to go and edit this sheet again, this back sheet. Go ahead and click on the add, and I'm just going to put stonework because it's going to be, very specific. And then this would be good if you didn't already have some sort of wisdom-based talent or wisdom proficiency. So I'm proficient with stonework, and what it says is it's based on history. So history is intelligence. So I want to change that to intelligence. And what it does is it adds your proficiency bonus. And then on top of that, it says that it doubles your proficiency. So I'm going to click on the star. So now it will double up the proficiency bonus. And whenever I want to use stonework, I can roll that to roll against whatever the challenge rating might be, if that ever comes up. So you can do it that way, or you can make it a skill, kind of a bonus you can do in the actions tab, where you can temporarily put that thing on, and then after you roll, it expires. So you can make it an effect that will temporarily increase your bonus for that roll. So it just depends on how you want to tackle it. But I think we've already dealt with this stone cunning, so we can close that. We already dealt with the proficiency with heavy armor because we added that to our proficiency bonus. Disciple of Life, we haven't dealt with that yet because we haven't picked any spells yet, or we haven't dealt with that. Military rank is background. This Divine Domain is basically just an explanation, but there are bonus spells that come with your build. So I don't know why that's not showing the life domain, which used to be a thing. But if you looked up the life domain in your actual class, so if I go to, let's see. So if I go to my class and I come down, and here I'm digging into the interface. So I came up here to class and level. And then if you go to cleric and then you scroll down, there's the life domain. This used to be on it used to list this in this area. I don't know why they quit doing that, but you used to be able to have this in there. That was something that was included. So this used to be on this tab, and I'm not sure why it doesn't do that anymore. But nonetheless, if you scroll down at first level, you get Bless and Cure Wounds. So I already added those because I knew that when I was building the character, because I built these several times. But if you were new to Fantasy Grounds, it'd be a little bit convoluted to try to look all that up. So that's why you got to kind of go back over these things. So this channel divinity, all that stuff is going to be part of that. So I'm going to leave actually this life domain up. I'm going to left click and drag this down to the hotkeys. So when I need to build other stuff, I can find it without having to dig through the interface. So that's a nice feature Fantasy Grounds has. But I'm going to go ahead and close this. But the life domain was down here under the class features under class, but that's where I found it. And that explains that domain more exclusively instead of just giving you the generic divine domain. So I will close that since I kind of already dealt with that. Spellcasting feature is usually calculated automatically. I don't normally have to mess with this, but one thing that you will probably want, and that'll be in the class description, is how many spells that you get to start with and all that. And that's normally in the class. So again, if I bring up this class thing again for cleric, So I'm doing that here in the class level, clicking on this cleric link here. So I guess the domain's listed here, the specialization, instead of on that list. But if I bring up this class thing, it's going to be here. I might as well bookmark that. And then if you scroll down about halfway, you're going to find the tables that contain what you're getting for each level. So at first level, you're getting these things, these features, and then your bonus proficiency is 2 for that. And then you get 3 cantrips and 2 first level spells, and then you also get those domain spells on top of that. So it doesn't really point that out very clearly. It's just kind of being familiar with the actual rule set and with D&D in general. So there's really no pop-up or anything that's going to warn you about that. You just kind of have to learn to use the platform and the rule set and actually learn how those things kind of go together. So this is something that you'll deal with quite often when you're building stuff in Fantasy Grounds, is you got to kind of go do the little extra research, but you won't know to do that until you start playing. So it's really hard to do a full-on tutorial because there's so many little edge cases. There's so many little ifs, ands, and buts, and there's so many niche things that only apply to certain builds, and so it's really difficult to account for everything. So now that we have that dealt with, so let's see, and here's all our proficiencies, here's our languages. So if these aren't spelled correctly, this language filter in the chat area won't work correctly. So if you're going to have languages, make sure they're available in the rule set. And if you want to know what languages are available, you can come over to the options, click on this gear, and then go to languages, and you'll see the list here of all the languages that are available. The GM can add languages, but as a player, you'll still be able to see this list and the spellings. So if you're unsure of how to spell a language that you're supposed to have, you could just hit enter and hand type it here, but just make sure it's capitalized and that it's correctly spelled. Otherwise, this drop-down list over here, you won't be able to select the language and use it in chat. So that helps with, like if you speak Dwarvish and you type something in here, you will get the translation if you know the language, and you'll get the runes. So this is important in regards to language. If you don't put the right language on your sheet and it's not available in the rule set, you won't get the drop down where you can actually select the language and then have like some gibberish or something show up here if the other players don't know the language. So that's an important thing of this particular rule set, is that the language filter is there, and if you want to use it, this has to be correct. So now you come over to the equipment, and then you see I got this whole list of stuff here. Some coins, it keeps track of the encumbrance, how much you can pull, lift, and drag, and your maximum load before you become encumbered. And then you have all these list things here. You have 3 different states. So there's the worn, which is this shirt-like icon. There's a bag, which means it's carried. And then the third option is it's not carried. So those are your 3 statuses. So in most cases, except for shields, armor, weapons, it's just going to be carried. In the case of weapons, shield, and armors, you have to have it equipped. Otherwise, it will not show up on this sheet here, which is your combat associated items for the actions tab. So if you don't have them equipped, they don't show up here. And if you have armor that you haven't equipped, it will not do the calculations correctly for your overall AC. So you get 2 from shield. He's getting 6 from the chainmail. But if you don't have that on your list here, and you don't have it equipped, it's not going to add that bonus. So really depends on what you're doing. But for the background, for this backpack, actually, I'm going to erase the word empty, and then I'm going to type backpack next to everything that I want to store in the backpack. So these might just be extraneous things or things that you're carrying with you for equipment, but I'm skipping the ammo and the armor and the shield and that stuff. So basically, it's all the equipment that's going to be going into that. So for the potion of healing, I'm actually going to put that in the pouch. So I'll put the pouch next to that. And then for my reliquary, that's don't need to worry about that, but I'll just say backpack for now. And this is a good way to sort things out in your inventory, because what will happen is it'll kind of indent and it will actually become kind of like it's like it's stored in that area. So that's kind of a nice thing. So this thing, these dice, this doesn't have a weight, so I'm just going to put 0.01, something like that. Because everything I believe should have some sort of number, so 0.1 for the dice. And then those are going to go in my pouch too. So it kind of carries those around in a pouch. And tinderbox will go in the backpack. Torches will go back there. So what you'll notice is you'll start getting these indents. So we have this crossbow bolt, chainmail, this is the case. So the crossbow bolts would probably likely go in that case. So I'll just type that, and that would be in the case. Here's your dagger, mess kit for eating. I think that'll go in the backpack. And everything else looks like it's in good shape. So this is just kind of how you organize the inventory. So let's just say you drop the backpack or you leave it somewhere because you don't want to lug it around with you. You can actually take the carried status off, and that will drop all the weight and the items from your inventory temporarily, and including the weight. So right now my weight is 73. If I pick the bag back up and use it as equipped, it goes up to 137. So that's shedding like 100 pounds, taking that backpack off. So that, there's quite a bit of, or maybe it's not quite that. Yeah, that's 100 pounds. So that's quite a bit of weight to shed there. So that might make a difference in regards to role play. If you're going to jump across a chasm or something like that, maybe your DM will catch you some slack if you're willing to drop the bag or hide it somewhere. So that's just some little organizational things that you can do in some rule sets. They have this ability. Depends on what it is. For notes, this is all your role-playing stuff. So here you'll have your size, which is the most important thing, because that has to do with your reach and the size of your token on a battle map. But all this other stuff is role-play. But in this case, he's going to be neutral good. I want to type that in because this word here, good, is important in regards to the spell protection from evil, protection from good. Any spells that key off alignment. So you want to have this on your sheet, just like they are in NPCs, because then that spell won't really work correctly if you don't have these on. So if my NPC has protection from good and I cast that spell on my NPC, it's not going to work well because you don't have anything indicated on your character sheet. So that's why you do that. And then this is going to be a male, obviously, so I'm just going to put that there. And then your size, medium. Those are your bare minimums there, I think, is the alignment and the size. Everything else you can or you don't have to put those on there. But for your background, for your soldier, if you want to flesh out your character, you do that at this point. And this isn't in the character wizard. This is part of your role play stuff. So you have a soldier specialty, which was when we were talking about rank and such. So I'm going to go ahead and roll. And it says I was a quartermaster. So I'm going to take that, drag and drop it onto my notes so I can remember that. It has to do with my rank and everything. So that's your quartermaster, kind of part of your soldier specialty. And then on the bottom here, there are these tables. So you have your personality traits, your ideals, bonds, and flaws. So you can make up your own or you can use these tables. So for personality traits, you can have one or two things. And let's say you didn't like that. So you can actually just kind of go, okay, I don't want to roll. Maybe I just want to pick. So you can either drag the text from down here in the chat area, or you can just drag them straight from the table. So I'm just going to say I've lost too many friends and I'm slow to make new ones. And then I might drag another one over there. So let's see. I'm always politeful. I'm haunted by the memories of war. I can't get the images of violence out of my mind. I have a crude sense of humor, so maybe I'll throw that in there. So these are just suggestions. You don't have to use these, but here's your ideals, so you can roll if you want. So let's see, it says greater good. Our lot is to lay down our lives in defense of others, so I don't mind that. So I'll just drag that from here. I can drag it from the list. So this way you don't have to retype them. And then for bonds, let's see what it rolls. For that, someone saved my life on the battlefield. To this day, I will never leave a friend behind. So I'll go ahead and drag that over there. And then the soldier flaw is number 5. So I obey the law, even if the law causes misery. I don't think that's him. I think I'd rather eat my armor than admit when I'm wrong. Sure, let's put that on there. So he's pretty adamant about being right. So these are just kind of things that you'll do to flesh out your character. And then, of course, you have a log here. So if you play organized play like Adventures League or Pathfinder Society or any of those things, you can record your events on this page, and this is where you kind of keep track of some of that stuff. So this is very optional if you do like organized play. And then for actions, this is where you're going to spend a majority of your time. So for this crossbow up here, I'm going to put 20 because that's how much ammo I have. And then a crossbow is two-handed, so I'm going to change this to a two-handed weapon. The dagger, I'm going to leave this alone. And then the warhammer, I can toggle whether I use it one-handed or two-handed or off-handed, depending on the situation. Most cases it'll be one-handed with a shield, but if I have a shield, I have to unequip it, but then I can change this over to two-handed where it does more damage. So that's kind of an honor system. There's nothing that prevents that or adjusts it automatically, although I could make an effect that cancels out the shield bonus temporarily, so I don't have to go all the way to my inventory and unequip it, because that's kind of a pain in the butt. So I just created an effect that'll cancel the shield bonus out temporarily until I pick my shield back up or until I change the handedness of this warhammer. But I went ahead and gave myself one dagger in case I want to throw it. So this is your ammo. And then here are the things. So here's my Disciple of Life thing, which is part of my effects here. Here's the racial stuff. So this Dwarven Resilience, and here's where you can do the effect instead of putting it as a skill increase. And then here are my spells. So if I go to standard mode and group, in this mode here, this is when you're building and preparing your character. So this Disciple of Life is already dealt with. We already kind of found out what our military rank was or what we were doing. We have the Dwarven Resilience, that's already in here. And this toughness is kind of baked into the rule set. There ain't much we can do about that. But basically, this is kind of a done deal. It's almost finished here. So if I switch to preparation, now I can actually go in and pick the spells. I can prepare all of these, actually. I don't have any limitations. Some of these are domain spells, so they don't really count against how many I've prepared, but it was 2 spells that I can have prepared, and then these are always prepared, Bless and Cure Wounds. So if you wanted to keep track of that separately, you can actually drag these into your cleric abilities. So there's Bless and here's Cure Wounds. So I never have to worry about those, and I can actually take these off of the regular level 1 spells because they're already going to be tracked up here, and they're not going to be handled exactly the same way, and they are my domain spells, so that's why I've done that. But in this cleric actions effects area, I want to essentially have this set up to where it's going to use my wisdom ability. And that way, if there's anything to do with saving throws or anything like that, it will pull from the actual ability. So that's why I moved those there, because these are domain spells or bonus spells. They're always prepared. I don't have to change them, and I can use them whenever. So that's a good thing. But these ones down here are actually just spells that I chose to have access to. And then if I want to prepare them, I would go into this preparation. So I might not have Detect Evil and all that, so I wouldn't have that one prepared. The other thing you can do here is track different items if you have consumable items. So we had that potion earlier. So if I go to inventory and I pull up this potion, which is in my pouch in this case, I can click on it. This gives me a description, but it doesn't necessarily give me the healing action that I would expect. So I'm going to go ahead and you can't drag this to the actions tab. You actually have to manually add it. So I'm going to add a group to the back of this. So this is a little bit more intermediate. This is not something you're going to be doing. Basically, as far as I'm concerned, the character is built. But if you wanted to go the extra mile and have everything set up and easier to play, you can add some extra things to this actions tab for tracking and that sort of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and add, I'm in the edit mode right now, and I'm going to add a power. So all this does is just adds a basic field that I can edit. So on the right-hand side, I'm going to type this as consumables. So this is where I'm going to track all of my consumable items, including the potion. And then I'm going to add anything that's consumable. So my water skin is a consumable item, the water in it, the rations, and my torches. And then I'm going to add the potion. So I'll just type in potion of healing. So all this is a reminder, like a note. And then I'll go back into preparation mode, and I'm going to change this healing as once instead of daily. It's going to be just once. If it goes on daily, if you use it, it'll replenish automatically. That's usually not the case. So rations, I have 10 of those, and that is a one-time use. Torches, same thing. Got a 10 there, changing it to once. And the water skin is enough to hold water for a day or two. So there's a one-time use there. The advantage of that is when I go back to combat mode and actions, which is the mode that you'll be in when you're playing, you can check these off as you use them, and it makes a record here. It's not tied into your inventory, unfortunately. So there are extensions that will do that for you. They're third-party ones, but in general, they're not linked. So if you update that sheet in the back, you'll have to also update these items in inventory. And all these do is keep track of the weight, the value, it has the descriptions and such. This is basically just a manual way to kind of check off what you've used through your session. Now, the potion of healing has some functionality that's missing. I'm going to add that. But first, I want to put the explanation or the description. So I'm going to unlock the potion of healing description, hit Control A and Control C for copy, and then Control V to paste in the information. So I just took the item information and attached it to this healing potion power that I'm going to make, and so that I have that info. And now I'm going to right click on the potion of healing itself in the consumables area, and then I'm going to add an action, and then I'll add the heal function. So this way I can use this as an actual function and not just say, okay, I got a healing potion, I want to use it. I can actually drag it to my ally or to myself. And then in regards to what it gets, you get 2d4 plus 2 for healing. So I'm going to grab a 4-sided die, right click, that adds another die, so that's 2, and then put 2 inside the bonus field. So now if you click on this, it'll actually roll the dice. Or you can drag it on top of your player or your allies on a map or in the combat tracker. So these are just little things that you'll learn along the way that will allow for you to add a little bit more automation and make it easier on your GM. Because if you can do all this yourself, I don't have to intervene if I'm your GM. So that's important. And then like this combat tracker, when you're actually playing, your GM will put you on the combat tracker, but you need to pick a portrait. So I'm going to just single click on the portrait, go through the default ones. Fantasy Grounds has a decent one. It's called Fantasy Grounds or FG Fantasy. And that has some basic fantasy type portraits that you can use temporarily until you find your own that you want. So I'm just going to use that. It takes a few seconds for it to open. And once it does, you can pick. So I'll pick this dwarf here. That'll be my icon or my token. So if you have a portrait, that becomes your default token. If you don't have, if you want a token, your GM will have to assign it. So in other words, a portrait becomes your default token unless you have a one manually assigned. And only the GM can do that. But as far as portraits go, you can assign your own. Just make sure they're square when you find the file, not rectangular or round. And then also make sure it's not too huge. I don't think you need a graphic any more than 256 by 256, maybe 512 by 512 or 520. That's probably the maximum dimension. Otherwise, it's too big. It's taking way too much memory for a little space like that. So it's really not necessary to have a huge photo for this particular case. So once that happens, your GM will drag that on and you'll be on the combat tracker. And then before you play, you can lay out where you want your character sheet to go. So I usually stick it over here. And then I'll expand this chat window a little bit, kind of shrink it down, kind of center it where I want it to go. And then I will change this. I'm going to uncheck those. I didn't use those. And then that's where I'll spend most of my time is on this sheet here, so that when I'm playing, it's all right in front of me. Occasionally, you'll need to go to like the front sheet or maybe your skills, but most of the time, unless you're leveling up, you're going to be spending your time here when you're playing. Now I'm going to take and put the initiative roll on the hotkeys below. That way I don't have to come back to this page. And then for skills, I'll probably do perception. So I'll drag the score and maybe healing or medicine. That's it. So I don't need a lot of shortcuts, but those are just things that I'll use all the time. And then to pass your turn on the combat tracker as a player, you click this down arrow and it will advance the turn. Well, sometimes players forget. So I usually drag that action or that button down to the hotkey. So everything's in one spot. I'm not hunting around looking for stuff. So this makes it a lot easier. So now I can spend most of my time in the combat tracker or on this sheet here for the actions tab and not have to flip through all these different pages to get this stuff. So that makes it or every time you're getting ready to run something, it's so much easier than trying to move windows around and all that sort of thing. So this is kind of where you want to be when you're getting ready to play. And this is kind of true in other rule sets too. So if you're playing Starfinder or Pathfinder, you kind of want to do the same thing, like lay everything out in a certain way. And then if you accidentally close these and you're like, crap, where did it go? You can double click on this right-hand side here. That'll bring up the sheet. Or if you really have to, you can make shortcuts, but that's so you can bring up your character sheet quicker. You just double click on the combat tracker and that'll bring the sheet back up. And then you just change it to the actions tab if you're not already there. And like I said, if you have a wound, let's say you've got 4 points of damage on your cleric, you either use the healing spell or you can use the potion that you made and just drag that healing button to the actual whoever it is or yourself, and it will roll and it will automatically cancel out the damage with a 9. So it only had 4 wounds. So this is just kind of, and then you would check it off if you used it. But this is just sort of the things that you're going to go through as you're using your character sheets, as you're building. So if you're a new game master and a new player, I would master this part first, because this is where a lot of the slowness, the unfamiliarity, the mistakes, problems arise. It's mostly in this part. Usually it's because you're not familiar with the interface, and then also you may not know all the little ins and outs of each character build. So they're not all the same across the board. Just the build process is kind of the same. But once you get into detailing these things and knowing which things are automated, which aren't, the limitations of Fantasy Grounds or the limitations of this character build, those sort of things come with time. And there's no manual that tells you, oh, this is automated, this one isn't. You have to add this one, but this one's already added. I mean, those are things that you have to learn over time. You're not going to know all that from the beginning. The only reason I'm able to rattle on and prattle about it is because I've done it so many times that I'm familiar with it, and I'm able to teach it and help you guys with it. So hopefully this is helpful for newer players, newer GMs. My strongest recommendation is know your resources, know what you're getting yourself into, when you're buying the stuff and you're setting it up. And then practicing building characters is paramount. I don't care what rule set it is, learn how to build the characters. Learn how to build them correctly and learn how they interface with the actual platform. That is very important for this virtual tabletop. You might know D&D, but you may not know Fantasy Grounds, or you might know Fantasy Grounds, but you're not necessarily going to know D&D. So those are where the actual work and the time comes in, is learning where the rubber meets the road. So you need to really learn how these little things interact with each other, because those are the differences between the rule sets and the character builds. Those are not the same straight across. What is the same is that the character sheets will look the same. The locations of the content will look the same. How you set up your table, like how I have it set up here, that should be the same. And using the shortcuts on the bottom, that's the same. But when it comes down to how many spells you get and knowing which stuff is automated and which stuff isn't, and which stuff is automatically calculated and which stuff is you have to add yourself, all that stuff takes time. So that's where the actual work, the experience, the time, getting to know, your group and your game master, asking questions, watching these videos, all that stuff kind of adds to it. So hopefully that's helpful to you guys. I'm going to call it. I think I've been rambling for over an hour. Yeah, an hour and 22 minutes. That's not an ideal length for a video, but nonetheless, I did cover a lot of content. And all this was done with the SRD and the basic rules. I didn't have any rule set that I purchased. So I just know that the basic rules gives you a few options, not very many, but enough to get you started to practice. And that's what you want. So if you're a player, you just have the basic license. This is a way to practice. If you are a GM and you haven't invested in too much stuff yet, you want to probably just get the core book, like the player's handbook, and maybe one adventure, maybe Lost Mine of Fendover. And that way you're not buying everything at once. And once you get familiar, comfortable, and you understand what your uses are and your needs, then go out and buy all that other stuff. I don't know how many people have gone out and spent over $300 and never use it. Because one, they can't invest the time into it. And two, they don't get to practice with it and stuff. So they get lost. And if you don't use the platform, you're really not going to learn it. So it's really difficult to do videos like this because everyone has a different level of understanding, a different amount of experience. And some people just know things and some people don't. So that's why I was very thorough about this. And some of you are like, come on, get to the part that I want. But I have to cater to everyone, not just one person. So I've had a lot of negative comments about people griping about, oh, you took so long. This should have only took 20 minutes. Well, if you're somewhat familiar with the platform, then yes, I agree. If you've never used Fantasy Grounds, or you're not familiar with D&D or Fantasy Grounds or even virtual tabletops, this type of thing is important. So that's why I have to be so thorough. I could break these down into smaller pieces, but then you kind of lose that cohesiveness and the connectivity. So it's not an easy task to create content for a whole different groups of people. So anyways, take care, everyone. Have a good week, and hopefully this helps, and I'll see you around. And if you haven't joined the Fantasy Grounds Academy, I would imagine you might do so in the future. It'll be helpful just to kind of learn from everyone, even if you don't take any classes or anything. You'll kind of start picking stuff up. You can ask questions, kind of get answers fairly quickly, or use the resources I showed you in the beginning. Use the forums. You can use the official Fantasy Grounds Discord, and you can also watch videos like this one. So there's all kinds of resources. You just